Nearly 200,000 people have backed an online campaign calling for cannabis to be legalised, which means MPs will now have to debate whether or not it should be in Parliament. Several police forces admit catching people smoking the substance is now low on their list of priorities. Anti-drugs campaigners say legalisation would be a dangerous move. Sky's Ursula Hansford reports.
Having set out its hardline position on drugs, the new Conservative government is not likely to want to legalise cannabis. But it seems there's never been so much public support for the idea. An online petition's collected nearly 200,000 signatures, which means the issue will now be considered for debate in Parliament.
If it becomes a legalised substance, then how are you going to be able to get a message that for some people it's like playing Russian roulette with the brain? And the trouble is, at this moment, we don't know who is vulnerable. It may be that they're genetically vulnerable. It may be that they've had a lot of emotional stresses in their lives.
The number of people smoking cannabis declined in the decade since 2003. But even so, 7% of all 11 to 15-year-olds in England used cannabis in 2013, while 6.6% of 16 to 59-year-olds smoked it in 2013-14. And the NHS estimates that 1 in 10 regular users become dependent. With resources as stretched as ever, police forces are also rethinking their positions on cannabis.
We've got situations where children are being sexually exploited, people are being human trafficked, modern slavery, domestic violence situations. When we've got to look at priorities, that person discreetly smoking a cannabis joint at home, not causing harm to anybody, that's not going to come high up on our list of priorities.
This is hemp. It has no psychoactive properties, but it looks very much like cannabis. It's likely to be the result of a campaign encouraging people to feed nutritious hemp seeds to birds. The Feed the Birds campaign, though, is not really about feeding birds. It's a physical protest against the prohibition of weed.
It's grown by organised criminal gangs who are making huge tax-free profits. You're leaving it to an unregulated market. There's millions of cannabis users in the UK who are needlessly being criminalised.
Police say they don't have the time or resources to properly enforce cannabis laws. And while unenforceable laws might make a mockery of government, many people will share the view that the drug should continue to be banned. Ursula Hansford, Sky News.
Well, let's talk about this now then. The former Chief Constable of Cambridgeshire Police, Tom Lloyd, joins us from Twickenham, and Elizabeth Burton-Phillips, who's the Chief Executive of the support group Drugs Fam, joins us from Twyford in Berkshire. If I can talk to you first, Elizabeth, you lost your son to drugs. Tell us what happened.
Oh, very sadly, he died after a long period of using drugs, starting with cigarettes, which was, in our situation, a gateway drug, and then went on to use cannabis and skunk and used other recreational drugs, sadly leading to his death from heroin addiction. And I'm certainly not saying that everybody who picks up a cigarette is going to end up a dead heroin addict, far from it.
But you are saying your position is that cannabis is most definitely a gateway drug.
I believe that cannabis is a very, very dangerous drug in terms of young minds in particular. There is very strong evidence to show that the impact of cannabis on the young person's brain can be very significant and very damaging, leading to psychosis and mental health problems, which impact hugely on families who have to pick up the pieces of loved ones who are very poorly for a long, long time.
Tom Lloyd, bearing in mind what Elizabeth has just said, and indeed her experience with her own son losing his life to drugs, you're a former Chief Constable, yet you think cannabis should be made legal.
Well, I think that access to cannabis for all adults should be legal, and it should also be legal under medicinal circumstances for everybody who needs it. You see, the position that we've got is that our drug policy is a hugely costly, counterproductive and harmful failure, and this petition and other polls show that the public is cottoning on to that, despite the fact that there are a lot of myths and distortions about all drugs, and including cannabis. Frankly, the people of this country are increasingly fed up with the waste of police resources on this unproductive activity. They're fed up with the fact that criminals make billions of pounds, these vicious, callous criminals, and they're fed up with the fact that children have easy access to cannabis and all sorts of drugs because there's a profit motive for the criminal gangs behind it. Now, what we have to start doing is addressing some of these myths, and clearly what I've just heard about the death of a young man is tragic, but we mustn't listen to some of the distorted untruths, lies about the dangers of cannabis. There was just a week ago a long study looking at the potential of cannabis consumed in adolescence to cause harm later in life, and it showed that there was no difference. I mean, the evidence is not compelling around cannabis being a cause of mental illness. There are now millions of people who use cannabis in one form or another all the time, and yet we have not seen in the last 40 years a corresponding increase in psychosis. What we've got to do is start thinking about, yes, there may be some harms associated with cannabis, let's not exaggerate them. Let's also consider the significant benefits of cannabis for medical patients. We've actually got to start thinking, do we want vicious, avaricious criminals in charge of this market where you never know what the quality is, they'll sell to youngsters? Or do we want a proper, smarter way under control and regulation to try and minimise the harms? We'll never get rid of them, we're human beings, we can't devise something perfect, but we've got a chance now with public backing for politicians to stand up and say this is the right time to have a very serious discussion about changing our failed policy.